Today, I want to talk to you about how to make a fire in adverse conditions. Today, it's pretty cold. Obviously, there's a lot of snow on the ground, and even though the air temperature is now above freezing, things are pretty wet, especially if they're covered in snow. So, let's get into the details, and I'll show you how I would go about making a fire in a circumstance like this. Hey guys, it's John from US Angler. I grew up in the South, and I'd spent most of my time hunting and fishing in the South. And if there's one thing I learned, it's that most Southern outdoorsmen don't have really good cold weather or winter clothing because they don't need it very often. And that's gotten me in trouble a couple of times. I've been hypothermic twice in my life. Both times were hunting in southern Mississippi, if you can believe that. I wasn't wearing the right clothing. It was really damp and cold. I had no way to make a fire, and I was freezing to the point that I couldn't speak. I could barely walk, and there's no way that I could operate a rifle or a shotgun with my hands. I had lost all ability to use my fingers in any meaningful way. You don't want that to happen to you, and you want to have a way to get out of that situation before it gets that far. Because once it's gotten that far, basically your only choice is to try to walk out, which is what I succeeded at twice. Learn from my mistake. So the first thing you want to think about is the difference between kindling, which helps you start an initial fire, and fuel, which is actually what you're going to be burning for heat and light. I'm going to collect all the kindling and fuel that I need today from wood that I find hanging in branches that's already dead and well dried, because anything on the ground is going to be too wet in all likelihood to actually burn. I haven't set this up. I'm not trying to be fake or unrealistic about this. I'm going to just walk over here into this little patch of woods and find some kindling. The reason I'm doing this in this order is that you want to have all the wood that you're going to need ready to go when you start your fire. You don't want to have a bunch of kindling, get your fire barely started, and then have to leave it and go out for fuel and come back to find your fire's dead. That's no good. You need it all, and you need it there ready to go. Okay, what I have here is mostly kindling. Maybe this biggest piece could be used as fuel, and this is probably enough for me to get a fire started, but obviously this isn't going to keep a fire going for any time at all. Just for demonstration, I'm going to stop here, but if I spent another 5-10 minutes gathering in there, I could have an armload full of this stuff. So let's see how I pick out a place to start a fire. So when you select a spot, especially when the ground's wet or snowy, you need to think about a couple of different things. The first is you need to insulate your fire from all that moisture. So I found some pine branches, or some fir branches rather, and I'm going to create a little base out of this that's going to elevate my kindling and fuel and keep it out of the snow until it's hot enough that it can really melt it and survive that. The second thing I want to do is make sure that it's a place that's relatively sheltered from the wind, and that overhead I don't have anything like snow waiting to fall on my fire. So I'm just simply going to brush some of this snow off with my foot, get it out of the way a little bit, drop some of this fir there to create a base, and I'm going to get my kindling ready to go. And I really don't have any fuel to speak of because I'm not actually building a fire. I'm just doing this to demonstrate to you guys how it's done. So I am going to take some of these intermediate pieces that are really too big for kindling and not big enough for fuel, and I'm going to make them more attractive to fire by creating some feather sticks to increase the surface area of this dry dead wood so that it catches flame more easily. Now take your time with this. If you're a fan of Forged in Fire like I am and my sister is, you know that cleaning up the metal before you make canister Damascus or before you make San Mai or Gomai makes all the difference. All that preparatory work pays off. Same thing's true with a fire. Make sure you have enough kindling, make sure you have enough fuel, and take your time assembling your fire so that you don't waste precious resources. It's actually faster to go slow. You hear this sound? That's how you can tell if wood's dry. If it snaps like that, it's dry enough probably to use in the fire. And even if your feather stick's not working out for you and those pieces are coming off like it is for me, no big deal. Just collect those and add them to your fire. In a pinch, you can even take your coat off or an outer layer off and lay that on the ground to keep all your tinder and kindling dry. For my purposes today, I'm not messing around with primitive fire starting and using a spark. I'm just going to use a Bic lighter. But I will make a video about the durability and reliability of Bic lighters later, so make sure you check that out. As you can see, my fire has blown out in the wind, and I probably didn't have enough tinder to really catch that flame and get things started in such a way that I could depend on it. My mistake. Learn from me. I was trying to cut corners and be fast for the camera. You don't want to do that in real life, I promise you. So here I'm making a lot more curls off of this stick that I found, and that should provide enough heat to actually get this going. So let's say you find some fuel like this that's been in the snow for a little while, and you've got a fire going like this. If it's not too damp, like if you just dropped it and stepped on it in the snow, you can put it directly on the fire at this point. But if it's wetter than that, you can lay it near the fire where it's going to dry out before you actually add it as fuel. And you can also see how quickly we're going through this small fuel and kindling. You really want to have larger pieces if you want to have a sustained fire over time, at least as big around as your wrist or forearm. So this is too small to be fuel, but I'm going to add it anyway to give you a sense of that this fire is both self-sustaining, at least for a while, and to reinforce the reason that you actually want to have your fuel on hand, because you don't have time to leave this fire for 30 minutes to go get real fuel, which is, at least as thick as a finger, if not as thick as your wrist. So that's how you make a fire in snowy conditions like this. Now, admittedly, this is not even close to the worst weather to make a fire in, but if you're interested in seeing me make a fire in the rain, leave a comment below and I'll absolutely take that task on. But right now, this fire is life-giving. It can help rescue party see you if that's necessary. It can help you dry out your clothes if you've gotten wet, and it can keep you alive if you were unprepared for the weather. It's an important skill to know, and I hope you've learned something today.